Welcome to Ausfilm Creatives, a podcast about Australian creatives working behind the camera. My name is Peter Sylvester and I'm your host. Today we'll be speaking to Earle Dresner, ACS. He's a cinematographer who's come from the commercial world, produced amazing commercials people would have seen in Australia and possibly overseas. And I came to know him through the production of The Legend of Ben Hall, as he came to the table to offer to do second unit work. And I hadn't known him at the time, but I checked out his work and I was like, wow, this guy, I felt like that he was actually a lot more experienced than I was, as this was my first feature film. So it was really good to have him on board, because I did really want to have someone on set that I could really trust and know that their quality work will achieve what needs to be done for the second unit work. So I've had to actually split this episode up into two, because Earl was so generous in sharing so much information about his productions that he's worked on and his experiences. So this is the first part of his interview. Welcome to the show, Earl. Tell us a little bit about yourself as a cinematographer and how you're involved in the industry.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks very much for having me. I've been involved in the industry for coming up to 20 years now, and it's gone really quickly, but started out not knowing what I wanted to do, and like a lot of people, just trying to find a foot in the door, and managed to work my way up and eventually start shooting, and mainly came up through commercials, so I had a lot of experience both in the camera department and then shooting commercials, and then eventually took a little while, but made the transition into drama, and now doing a bit of everything, which is great. But trying to focus on shooting the best drama I can.
Excellent. And I guess when you began, and you just mentioned that you obviously didn't know what you wanted to do, how did you end up wanting to be a cinematographer, or why did you choose to be that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because you read a lot of stuff from DPs, and they always say, oh, my dad gave me a Super 8 when I was 6 years old, but I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. I finished school and had no idea what I wanted to do, and ended up deciding to go to university and do what they called a Bachelor of Media, pretty much because it sounded interesting. I was even interested in things like radio and stuff like that. And in the second year at uni, we had to do electives, and I did sound actually for the first semester. And in the second semester, I thought, I'll try film and TV. That looks like a bit of fun. And it was weird. I pretty much fell in love with it straight away, and just was right into the cameras. And, we were shooting on Canon XL1s, I think they were called. And, it was right into it. And then everyone wanted to be a director or a producer. And I just found myself being really keen on being the cameraman or the DP, and, shot a few little shorts and little mini docos there, and came out going, all right, I've worked it out. This is what I want to do. And so it was, it was a kind of a weird experience that happened reasonably suddenly. But then I, very quickly got a passion for it, and, pushed on from there.
When you started doing the camera work and things like that, did you get an exposure to the really more intense version of what a cinematographer is as far as lighting, or was it you were doing small projects and then you slowly got up to the next ones, or how was that sort of, I guess the exposure between, someone who just shoots, straight footage, no lighting kind of thing, to then suddenly jump up and having to do like commercial, which is very intricate? Yeah,
I was kind of really fortunate in a way. So I finished uni, and I was like, okay, what do I do next? And, I always say I learned more the first day I stepped onto a film set than I did in the 3 years at uni. But, I got the bug for it there. I managed to get a work experience at a commercial production company in Sydney called Film Graphics. And I went in there for a week of work experience and pretty much just hung out with the guy. They had their own camera department, so all their own camera gear, 35mm film cameras, 16mm, a whole bunch of lenses and all the gear. And they had a little studio in Sydney where they kept all the gear, and did a few little shoots. And I did a bit of work experience there. Didn't do any shoots, just kind of hung out with the guy who ran the camera department. And then he eventually got me onto a job. And the first job I ever did, first films that I ever went to, was this massive commercial for a Singapore telecom company, directed by David Deneen, who's kind of known as the one of the best commercial directors around. And, so I got thrown in the deep end on that, just being a camera attachment and doing video split and things like that. But I saw, from then and then continuing to work with those guys, I was lucky enough, and that was at the end of 99 and then into 2000, and they did a whole bunch of ads for the Sydney Olympics with all big sports stars. And so I started working with them a lot, and I eventually got a full-time job with them. So I was running their camera department. So I not only got to play with all the gear and learn how to use all the gear and experiment with that, but I was on big commercial film sets all the time with the best DPs in Australia and the best crews and the biggest jobs. So I kind of got to be able to watch a lot of it, be able to see, big lighting setups, big camera setups, cranes, all the toys and things like that. And I got to, while working, my way up through the camera department, I was kind of lucky enough to work on the bigger jobs. So I got to see these guys doing what they did and try to learn a lot from them. And meanwhile, at the same time, I was there shooting my own little stuff. The guy I took over from in the camera department, he became a director at Film Graphics. And while he trained me up, we spent the first year trying to get him a show reel. So we'd go out and shoot little, spec ads and music videos and things like that to try and get him something to show on his reel. So that was small bits of lighting, but not very much. A lot of just trying to do a lot with nothing. So I was kind of learning that part, and then I was on set on these big sets, watching other people do the big stuff. So I think when I then progressed to start shooting more and more, of course they always started as smaller things with less money and less resources, but I'd at least seen how to do the bigger stuff. So when a job came up that was a studio job or green screen or things like that, I'd seen it done a little bit before. But like anybody else, you still have to kind of go in there and try your best, and you do what and learn on the job to a certain extent.
Was there a moment there that you just went, wow, this is it, and something that really impacted you?
Yeah, I think I knew pretty much from the time I started with Film Graphics. I kind of was pretty focused and knew what I wanted to do. And like I said, Jono, the guy who'd come before me, he'd become a director. But for some reason, I kind of knew that I was more interested in being a cinematographer than a director. And, I was really, really lucky at Film Graphics because I got to, when we weren't shooting these big jobs, I got to sit in the studio with a bunch of camera gear, and I'd do things like I'd see a new film stock come out, and I'd call the guy from Kodak and I'd say, the directors at Film Graphics are really interested to know what this new film stock is like, and he'd deliver 5 rolls to the studio the next day. So I'd shoot tests on the rolls and I'd play around with that, and I'd work all day in the studio and then go out at night with mates to a car park and shoot, whatever, short films and all sorts of stuff. So I really fell in love with it then. And, I was also really lucky because if a director, especially Jono, but if another director at Film Graphics had a little low budget job or a love project they wanted to do, they'd come up and say, I want to shoot this thing. Do you want to come and shoot it for me or help me with it? So I got to shoot a bit of stuff. I got to get a very bad, but a bit of a reel together. And by the time I left Film Graphics after 3 years, I was a focus puller, a first AC, and continued to do that. But I also had a reel, and I also got, kept shooting, sort of lower budget jobs. And I just kept going from there. And I just always loved it. There was always something new, what it's like. There's always a new location or a new actor or different filmmaker or director or production company. So there's always something new and always something different. And I was always learning. That's the thing I loved about it the most. Every job I was doing, I was always learning. When I was started out, it was the emerge of digital was starting to emerge, and that was a really interesting time. And, I'd have somebody call me up and say, we've got a job, but we want to shoot it on the Panavision Genesis camera. Have you used that before? And I'd go, yeah, of course I've used it. And then I'd call Panavision and go, I need a lesson on the Genesis, quick. How do you use it? So it was constantly a learning process, and, it was scary at times, but you kind of had to dive in and hope for the best.
So you mentioned earlier that you'd started in commercial. How are they different in your experience between narrative or drama and commercial?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and something people talk about a lot. And I know when I was really always been keen to do drama, the years and years that I spent shooting commercials, trying to move into drama, it was I heard a lot about the schedules are so different and the money's so different and it's a completely different thing. And if you're either a commercial DP or a drama DP and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think in the 90s and probably even the early noughties, commercials were quite different to they are now. They were very, very slick. They were, very much every frame, and every frame of every shot was, this perfectly set up thing. We used to do commercials where we'd shoot 3 shots in the morning and we'd shoot the pack shot in the afternoon. Not me shooting. That was back in the days when I was assisting. And, so I think back then it was a very different thing. But, I found that commercials have changed a lot. We do a lot of commercials now which are, doco style, or they're, very natural light. You shoot quick, you shoot 30 setups in a day. There's not enough time, not enough money. There's a lot of different expectations. I think even production companies and directors and producers and clients and agencies are also looking for something new and different from commercials. They're looking for something a lot more real and a lot more, not the big, slick, overlit kind of things that they used to be. So when I'm eventually managed to transition into drama, and after hearing a lot of people say, oh, it's going to be really difficult because, it's not like commercials, I kind of got in there and was like, you know what, it's actually not that different. The biggest differences for me is that when you're shooting commercials, it's all about these little moments. You're always trying to find that 1 or 2 second beat. So you're either trying to do something really, really specific and get it perfect, or you're shooting 10, 15, 20 minutes of footage just trying to grab that little 1 second of magic. So your mindset is a lot about, telling this story in 30 seconds or 60 seconds, and you're kind of focused on, we just need that little bit, to work right. Then, of course, you've got the client and agency and the product kind of part. And with drama, for me, it's more about this big overall, beast that you're trying to tame and manage throughout a process. But the interesting thing for me is, since going and shooting some TV shows and a film, I now go back and shoot commercials, and I actually feel a lot more free to kind of experiment and to try things. And, I kind of realize that the visual side, the visual side of both is obviously important, but in a commercial, a lot of the time there's no dialogue. It is all just visuals and music or something like that. So the visuals play a huge part in a commercial. But when I'm shooting drama, I'm always very aware that, as much as I know I can really contribute to the piece and what I'm doing is really important and making a difference, I also know that the script and the story and the performance is what matters. And I always want to make sure that I don't get in the way of that I support that and I don't, distract from that. So I think there's little different, approaches and mindsets to the two, but ultimately they're not really as different as I always thought or was told.
There you go. Yeah, I don't have experience from that part. I guess you could say I'm more documentary shooter and turned drama. So the long hours I was used to, hanging around waiting for the right time to capture things and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's right. And you read a lot of people. Roger Deakins started out in documentaries. He's probably my hero as a cinematographer, and he talks a lot about learning to do a lot with a little, learning to react to situations. And honestly, I think in commercials these days, those skills are really relevant as well. And there's a lot of commercials I shoot, which are, these family lifestyle commercials. They're usually for banks or insurance companies or something like that. And they're just all about, happy living. And a lot of those commercials are throw a camera on your shoulder or on an easy rig or something like that, and have a bunch of kids and parents on a beach, and you literally end up, you're running around chasing them for half an hour trying to find these little moments. It's about, trying to find the best angle that works with the light and works with the reflection, and, find the moments on their faces. And there's a lot of that stuff in commercial work now.
With a commercial, do you have a project that you really hold to your heart, that you got to really experiment and take it to the next level, that maybe the agent didn't really put that in writing? Yeah,
that's a really good question. There's a couple of kind of examples which are so very different to each other. I did a commercial which was a kind of a weird commercial because it wasn't a straight up commercial. It was this kind of slightly longer piece, almost promotional piece for Lexus. And they basically come up with a really bizarre concept where they designed a car or the body of a car, and they put all this special paint and stuff all over it, and the car could glow in the dark. And they could even set it up that it reacted to, I'm trying to remember if they did it for real or not, but in the story of the ad, the car reacted to the driver's heartbeat. So the faster the heartbeat of the driver went, the more faster the car would pulse. And that was a really interesting experience for me because it was a big commercial. The references were these massive European car ads at night. It was at night on a racetrack. It was a perfect example of one of those ads where you go, shit, I've done a couple of car ads, but I've never done anything like this before. A car that glows in the dark, shooting at night on a racetrack. There was all this stuff. So, and it was also, very low budget for what they were trying to do. So that was one where, it was a real project and a real, trying to work out how we can make this work, how we can get this done, realizing that you can't actually light a glow-in-the-dark car. You actually have to make sure there's no light hitting it, and then trying to find a camera and a lens that'll photograph, and expose for that kind of thing. So, I mean, that was a really interesting one. The agency, especially the creative director of the agency, was very heavily involved, and it was it certainly was one where it was more an exercise in trying to work out how to make this thing work and how to get it done, and try to work out all the the little quirks and things that we could and couldn't do and make it work. And it was one night out at Eastern Creek Raceway in Sydney. It was huge, but it was a great experience because we managed to pull it off. And we were driving home with the sun in my eyes down the freeway at 8 o'clock in the morning, saying, going, wow, we actually managed to do it, and it turned out really well. So that was a kind of a tricky logistical one. And then, then there's a lot of other commercials where, it's more about, like I was talking before, about these kind of bank ads and insurance ad, where it's more about, families and different situations and slice of life. And it's more about trying to find things, a lot of the times now they're not real, or they're non-actors. And it's about, trying to find moments and trying to, capture something that's supposed to be really real and really emotional and supposed to, engage with people. I did an ad for CUA Bank Insurance a few years ago, and it was up in Queensland, in Brisbane and Stradbroke Island, and it was all about that. It was all real people and trying to find little moments, and there was one of the scenes was a pregnant woman, real pregnant woman, who was just standing in front of a mirror, rubbing her belly, and we were just shooting that, and then the director starts talking to her, and she got really emotional and started crying, and I remember I was looking through a doorway, and I just kind of just walked straight in and got in tight on her face, and it was a really beautiful moment. It was a really beautiful moment between me and her, and and all of us, and kind of an unexpected thing, and things like that are beautiful, whether it's a commercial or a film or a documentary, whatever it is. I think it's about trying to find those kind of moments. But you talk about kind of the unexpected and things developing and changing. The biggest thing that I learned shooting commercials and have taken that through into drama is about the relationship with the director. And I think in my early days, I used to think that my job was just to do whatever the director said, and do whatever he asked for, or she asked for, and if they thought that a particular type of lighting was better, or this was better, or that was better, yep, that's fine, I'll just do that. And it took me a long time to realize and learn that just like anything else in this business, nobody knows everything, and nobody, the reason they employ other people and have other crew members is for their expertise and their creativity. And so learning to, be able to, not in an aggressive way or an argumentative way, but being able to challenge a director and being able to have discussions and go, I hear what you're saying, but here's another option, or here's an idea that might work better, or no, I really feel strongly about this. I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned, and one of the things that, as soon as I started doing it, I'd get directors saying, "Oh, great! Oh, that's so good! I love it when the DP disagrees with me or challenges me, or and they'd say, after seeming like they knew everything, I'd say something like that, and they'd come back and go, oh, you know what? I don't know. That was just an idea. I didn't know if it was the best idea or not. I'm so glad that you came up with a better idea. That's way better. So that was a big learning experience as well, and that's when I learned to not just look at a storyboard and go, right, that's the frames we're shooting, and that storyboard looks like a 40 mil, with this angle. Just to take them as a guide, talk to the director, learn as much as you can about the project, and then not be afraid to bring yourself to it as well.
Yeah, I think obviously the relationship's important, that you hopefully the meetings you had before you go to shooting, that these directors are open to that kind of attitude. And I think I've never really had experience where people aren't. So most good creative people tend to be fairly confident in what they know, so they're pretty easy to approach. But yeah, I do agree that there's a level where that our job is like we've spent so much time, looking at the project in a visual sense that sometimes obviously we will have other visual ideas that might not it won't conflict what the director's vision is, but it will enhance it. And, so you have to bring it up because you go on the day of the shoot, and the film that we got to work on together, a couple of times that's happened where I just said to Matt, no, don't be afraid. It's okay. It's going to work.
Absolutely. And that's part of it as well. That's what they, a lot of directors, are insecure like the rest of us. And sometimes they just want someone to say, don't worry, it's going to be great. It's going to be good. And the film I just did, there was a few occasions like that. The director, Seth, he was unbelievably prepared, knew exactly what he wanted, was a real all-round director, knew a lot about tech, knew a lot about camera and lenses and lighting, knew a lot, real big into story, wrote it as well. But there were times where he'd go, oh, shit, or there was something in his head that he thought it had to be this way. And, for the 100 different reasons you get on a set, it didn't end up that way. And sometimes they just need us to say, it's cool, it's different, but it's just as good. It's okay. It's okay to do it that way. And I think for DPs, it's also important that, when you read a script and you start visualizing the film in your head and you read a line and that just evokes an image in your mind, you go, oh my God, yep, I've got it. I can see that. And, sometimes you actually also need to be flexible enough that when the director sees it differently to go, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a different take on it. So I think it's the same with the production designer and everybody else. So that's the beauty of this business, the collaborative nature of it, where, hopefully people will get to throw ideas in and you decide what's the best one.
Exactly. One of the projects that you worked on was Glitch. I wanted to touch a little bit on that because I guess it's an interesting view that you've come on season 2 to shoot 6 episodes. And so with that, what was like, as far as a visual concept, like on a feature film, you work it out with the director and you come up with your own look. But in that case, you've come in and you've kind of had to follow Simon Chapman's style in a way. Did you have to develop that further, or did you kind of add your own thing to it, or how did you approach when you decided to sit down with the director, or was it one director for the entire series?
No, it wasn't. We had 2 directors on that. That was a really interesting experience actually. So you always have a setup director on a TV drama, and that was Emma Freeman, who did direct all 6 episodes of season 1. So she came back again to kind of helm the series, but this time she was doing 3. And Tony Krawitz, another director, was doing 3. But it was really interesting because I was shooting a pilot with Emma for another series. And while we were doing that pilot, obviously we'd got on pretty well, and she'd spoken to the producers of Glitch, which was going to happen a few months later, and basically told them that they should chat to me about it. So they asked me to come and meet them about season 2. So of course, first thing I did, I had watched season 1, but I went back and watched season 1 again and, studied it basically. And what I saw in season 1 was that I thought Simon did an amazing job. I loved the show. I loved the character drama of the show. But there were a few things in there where I thought, these are the places where I feel that, we could make a slight change to it. Some of those look like, when you watch something and you can almost see the compromise or the lack of time or the lack of money, and you go, I can see what they were trying to do, and then I can, and that scene was great and that scene was great. And then there's the scene that was just 2 mid-shots because you go, they probably had 15 minutes to shoot or so. So I saw that kind of stuff. So I kind of went in there going, I really want, one of my big things was to try really hard and, and push that we have as few of those as possible, that we find a way to, to keep the style and the tone and the mood of the show, consistent and strong. And then there were a few little things like just, for example, the biggest example was the way they approached exterior nights. And, for whatever reason that was, I just kind of went in and went, that's not the way I like to do it, and I feel there's a better way to do it. And then as I kind of read the script for season 2, I also realised that season 2 was, season 1 had that sinister element to it. It had the person kind of try to track him down. But season 2 took that to a much higher level. There was a lot more science involved, and the kind of this woman scientist who, you think is kind of this evil person who's trying to, operate on the people who've come back, and there was another, this guy trying to hunt them down. So it felt like the writing, the tension had risen a lot. So I kind of spoke to Emma a lot about it and the producers, and I kind of thought we could just ratchet it up a notch. I thought we should take what Simon did, not mess with it, not try and make a different show, not try and reinvent it, but I thought we could take it and then we could, turn the volume up a little bit. What I always said to people was like, you tighten the screw a little bit more and suck the air out of it a little bit more. So I felt like we could, go get a little bit more contrast, a little bit more mood. While maintaining the ethos of season one, we looked a lot at the script, and I read stuff in the script, and it's all about being in summer in this country, Victorian town. It's always really hot. So we just thought, okay, what are the ways that I can make the show feel moody and feel like a kind of a thriller, but still feel really hot and oppressive. And so, we tried to come up with ways, that classic thing of how do you make everything look really hot and bright, or hot but not bright. You know what I mean? Don't make everything light and bright, but how do you do hot and dark? That was kind of the challenge. So, I tried to talk to production designer Paddy Reardon and said, okay, well, let's put like, we call those slat blinds on all the windows. So it can be really burning hot outside, but it's like this light's not getting into the interior. So the interiors are kind of dark. And, we talked a lot about trying to make things really claustrophobic and stuff like that. So, I worked really hard to try and, put my stamp on it and sort of take it another level. And also the other thing was it was co-produced by Netflix. So a lot of the talk was all about, it's going to be on Netflix and it's going to be on the icon next to Stranger Things, and that's what we're competing with. So I'd always remind the producers about that when they didn't have enough money for something. I thought, what about sitting next to Stranger Things on the Netflix venue? But so from that perspective, I thought we needed to take it up a notch as well. So it was a really interesting kind of challenge to, as not just taking a thing and going, okay, let's start from scratch and work out what this thing is. It was we kind of know what it is, but where can we take it to take it to the next level? And the other thing that I also thought about a lot was I think a lot about other shows, season 2 of other shows, and a lot of shows where the season 2 was very unsuccessful compared to season 1. And I was thinking about, why that happens. And a lot of the time, and I think the same thing happened with Glitch. Glitch was a show that a lot of people didn't know much about. And they heard about this show, which was about people crawling out of their graves. So they thought it was going to be a show about zombies or something. And when they watched it, they went, oh, shit, this isn't a show about zombies. This is a show about relationships and real people struggling with this weird scenario and how to deal with it and how it affects their relationships. And the love triangle thing between James and Sarah and Kate was I thought was such a beautifully written thing. It was just like nobody's fault. No one's done the wrong thing, yet here they are stuck in this bizarre love triangle where, nobody's wrong, but nobody knows what to do. So I was really aware that everybody who watched season 1 of Glitch went in with very little expectations or no expectations and went, oh, wow, this is amazing. But I knew they'd watch season 2 going, oh, I love season 1. I can't wait for season 2. Season 2 is going to be amazing. So I would always say to everybody that we need to make it so good that, because everyone's expectations are higher. So we need to make sure that the production value and the way we tell the story and everything is a lot better than season 1, because if it even is going to be equal to season 1 in how it's received. So that was a big challenge. Another thing I did, with non-lighting thing, was I also said I want to try and keep the camera moving a lot more. There was a lot of stuff in season 1 where I thought probably for time and stuff like that was quite static, and I was like, I know it's hard, I know it's time consuming, but for what I would do is Emma Freeman, who directed all of season 1 and half of season 2, she has a really interesting process where she always shoots close-ups first, and she loves cross-shooting, and she's totally unapologetic about that. When you first meet, she says, "This is how I work, and this is what I've done. It's been amazingly successful for her." And it's hard for a DP, and your first instinct is, "Oh shit, how's that going to affect the look and all that?" But what it does do is it makes sure that you spend most of your time you've got on the performances, on close-ups, on performances. So what I would do then is go, okay, we're going to be cross shooting close-ups, and while we're doing, and a lot of scenes, in TV, you're lucky if you get, your 2 close-ups and a wide shot. So what I do is we'd be cross shooting close-ups, and while we're doing that, I'd always have the grips laying a dolly and track somewhere for the wide. And so every single wide shot, it'd either be a little slow push or a little left to right. So just to keep that kind of tension going, just to keep that theme of there's someone out there watching, nothing's ever quite certain, they're always kind of on the run, everything's always, up in the air. So I kind of wanted to do that, and it was hard because you often really stretch for time, but I pushed and pushed and pushed. The poor grips would have laid hundreds of tracks. Sometimes I'd get in and go, oh shit, I put it in the wrong spot. Can you relay it over there? But they'd, I just kind of committed to it and said, it's one of those things I'm not gonna give up on. And that's a lot of, Glitch is a perfect example, but there's a lot of, especially TV drama, and even this film I did, where the only way to get what you need to get out of it is to just push and push and push and try really hard not to compromise, because it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I know that too well. Working on super low budgets.
Yeah.
So working with 2 different directors, you're the maintaining constant on the show as far as behind the scenes. How did you see the differences between the 2 directors that were doing the show?
Yeah, that was a really, really interesting experience and a great learning experience for me, because first of all, Emma and Tony are very, very different styles. They're very different directors in the way they approach it. Emma is one of those directors who is like ridiculously organized. She'll always block a scene, always let it see what happens with the actors, but she's very, very, well prepared is not the right word. She has a plan, and she comes in with a pretty clear plan, and she knows the shots she needs for each scene. And, the scene will be blocked, and Emma and I look at each other and we'll go, yep, it's there. Do we need this? No, probably don't need that. We'll see if we've got time. We might do that, and bang, it's in. Where Tony is a director who kind of wants to feel his way through it a little bit more. And he really likes to let the actors, let a scene kind of work itself out, do several block throughs, let the actors go, oh, what would happen if you did this? What would happen if you did that? And kind of really find the essence of a scene on set on the day, and just generally just different styles. I mean, their approaches to actors, their approaches to camera and all that was really different. So that was, real big challenge. And the other hard thing is that you do all your pre with the setup director. So I do 4 weeks of pre, which is not a lot anyway. And, and that's all with Emma when you get some time with her. And Tony starts his pre the day we start shooting, on shoot day 1. So my pre with Tony is, meeting at cafes or at locations on the weekend, or, him coming to set and us talking at lunchtime. And so it's really difficult, kind of fractured pre-process. So that was really hard, but also really interesting, and I could see the crew, the crew get in their mode, they get in their rhythm, and they kind of go, yep, okay, I know that, we'll probably lay a track there. I know I'll have this thing ready for here. And then the new director comes on and the style's different, and you can see them kind of going second guessing a little bit and going, oh no, it's Tony now. We'll probably be more like this, or we need to do that. So that's an interesting process. And then the other one, which you mentioned, which is really interesting, and that was a huge learning thing for me. As a DP, you always thinks it's, as director is it's their kind of vision and their project. And, while we talked about having our own ideas, we're trying to, serve their story and serve their vision. With TV, with multiple directors, what you find, like you said, is that you're the consistency on set. You're the person who's actually there from day 1 to the end. I mean, the production designer's there the whole time, but they're not on set a lot of the time. So you go, especially when the block 2 director turns up, you're like, well, I've actually, been here for a few weeks. I know the visual style, but also just the general rhythm and style of the show, pretty much more than they do, in a sense. So, you hope they've watched rushes and you've talked to them and stuff like that, but you end up finding yourself having to kind of be the guardian of the tone and the look and the style of the show. And that's really interesting, and it's kind of slightly weird dynamic, but, I kind of felt myself growing into that with each day and with each week. And it was an odd experience for me, but you find that you sometimes need to go, nah, that's not this show. I see what you're doing, but we haven't really been doing that. And, it's different. It's a different message, or it's a different thing to what we've been doing. A perfect example of glitch. The other thing that we tried to introduce in season 2 is that the whole idea of like sucking the air out of it and tightening the screw was to do really, really wide and really tight close-ups and not do a lot of mid shots. I kind of got in this thing where I wanted everything to be really tight or really wide. So, when Tony comes along for block 2 and says, all right, let's do a close-up, and I line up, I'm showing with my hands, but I line up, really tight, almost ECU on 100 mil or something, and he would be like, oh no, couldn't you just pull out a little bit? And then suddenly I'm just going, no, we can't. That's what we do. We do the, the claustrophobic close-up. So, and then he would explain a reason for wanting to do that, and you go, okay, no, that's cool, I get it, but it's that slightly weird situation where, you find yourself in a different relationship with a director than we're generally used to.
It's interesting. And I guess with these shows, I'm assuming with Glitch, it was fairly chronological, as in you shot it episode by episode rather than trying to shoot the whole series in one.
Well, you'd think so, but Glitch season 2 was a one of the more difficult scheduling-wise shows because there was a lot of actor restrictions. Yeah. And also it started out that Emma was going to do 1, 2, and 3, and Tony was going to do 4, 5, and 6. But because of all these actor restrictions and because of a whole bunch of other things, Emma ended up doing 1, 5, and 6, and Tony did 2, 3, and 4. And not only that, but we didn't shoot all of block 2 and then all of block 1. We literally did like 2 weeks of block 1, 3 days block 2, another week and a half block 1, week block 2. There was like, I don't know how many times we went back and forth. So that was really, unusual and even more challenging because we would shoot completely out of order. I mean, and the fact is in TV, you do a lot of that. I mean, usually you've got blocks. Another show I did, we had 3 directors and they did 2 eps each. So you're only dealing with those 2 eps and it's, it's much better. But on Glitch, when Emma's doing 1, 5, and 6, we'd go to a location. We'd go to James and Sarah's house and we'd shoot on one day. We'd go, okay, 2 scenes from episode 1, and now we're going to go and do a scene from ep 5, and then we're going to do 2 scenes from ep 6. So, that must be really incredibly difficult for the actors. It's very, I don't think on Glitch, probably partly because of that, I think it was almost impossible to try and, do a kind of a progressor look throughout the series. It was almost the idea of trying to go, okay, we're going to start it here and we're going to move to a darker or a desaturated by the end, I think would have been impossible because you're jumping around so much and the schedule's so tight. So that was hard as well. And that was hard for everyone. For Emma and Tony, going back and forth was difficult. For the crews, trying to jump between directors and things like that was hard. And, obviously for the actors, that's really tricky. But that was another really big challenge. And unfortunately, instead of shooting a location out for a block as well, we'd be going back and forth between locations quite a bit as well. So that was extra time and things like that.
Wow. Yeah. And that's it. It's interesting because I don't know, I guess with Sisters being a TV produced kind of show, that would have been a little bit more stable.
No, well, after doing Glitch, I think anything would have felt easier, from those kind of things I just explained. But Sisters is a Channel 10 show. It's there's kind of less locations. They're all in kind of inner city Melbourne. And Emma directed, set up Sisters as well. And then we had 2 other directors on that. And we tried really, really hard not to just go, we're going to make a Channel 10 show. It probably didn't end up exactly where we wanted to and where it started. But when we did the pilot, we were really trying to do something different. And 10 at first, they were unsure about it. They were a little bit shocked by the pilot and were like, oh, I don't know if it's us. And that was kind of the point. I always imagined that it was 10 kind of trying to compete with Netflix, trying to go, we need to get some people who are watching Netflix to come back and watch 10. But ultimately, it's always a commercial TV show. And, that was an interesting learning experience for me as well, that, as much as you can try to push it, they want to get new audience, but they don't want to alienate their current audience either. So it is a balancing act. But that was much more straightforward. In with 3 directors, which once again, very different directors, Emma, Shannon Murphy and Corrie Chen, and they all had their own styles and they all had their own way they wanted to do things. So once again, you do that same kind of balancing act. But 3 blocks, shoot each block out, individually, generally be at each location only once per block. So it was a much more streamlined process for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Get those blessings. But on the other hand, when you have these really intense and crazy kind of productions, you probably find some new ways to do things, and really it pushes you to try, and hopefully next time you take it, you actually become possibly quicker at something or more efficient.
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot, and you kind of, because you're like really in the trenches and shows like that. And that was my first kind of proper full TV series that I started and finished myself. And when you finish something like that, and that was a very, very full on experience, I think probably anything going on to anything after that would have felt easier. But what it does is you kind of go, I've had to deal with these really difficult things. I had to deal with this schedule that on paper doesn't look that bad if you say, oh, we've got 9 days per ep, but when you have to go back and forth between locations and you're jumping between blocks and all that stuff, for me, it became a very intense experience. And I did that myself as well. I kind of had blinkers on and was so focused on it, and essentially dug a hole for myself for 4 months. So it was such an intense experience for me that I think after that, I learned so much about filmmaking, but I also learned a lot about how to survive as a filmmaker and how to get through projects and still have a family and still have a life and still have your health and sanity. And so I learned a lot about that as well. So on the next one, I think I said anything would have been Asian Sisters was not as difficult in a lot of ways, but I also think I learned a lot about how to manage that process better.
Well, we'll cut it there, but we've got a lot more coming from Earl in the next episode. So thank you for listening, and look forward to sharing more with you in the next episode.